All right, let's talk about how you create a meaningful introduction. The diagram I have on the right is what I call the inverted method. Some people also refer to it as the inverted pyramid, but it's kind of a tried and true way of creating introductions that kind of orient your reader, set up the context, and really kind of engage them in the argument you're going to make. So when I say inverted method, that's what I mean by this upside down triangle. So we start really big and broad and then kind of narrow until we get to the really specific part, which is your thesis and your argument. So if you look at the top over here in the blue, you'll see that it says start broad. So what I mean by that is you're going to want to connect your topic, what you're going to write about, to the wider context. So in a way, engage your reader by telling them something that's relevant to them, by appealing to something they know about. In English class, they might have called this your attention getter, your hook, but it's really kind of that big picture entry point that everyone can use to get to their, to kind of bring them into your argument. The next level is what in yellow called narrowing the focus. So like I said, we started really broad. The next part is to narrow it a little, getting closer to our topic. This is also sometimes called a link or a bridge because it's really kind of taking us one step closer to what's in red, which is your thesis statement, which should be specific to your argument and what you want to say. So let's look at an example of what that might look like. So if I was going to write an essay on whether or not school uniforms should be required in public school, a broad idea that I might connect to is conformity. I might create a picture, I might ask a question about it, I might find a quotation about it, but starting with something as broad as conformity makes it so that everybody can relate to it in some way. When I say big idea, I'm really talking about those universal abstract ideas that anybody has experience with, has seen before, and conformity is an example of that. Then the next one where we kind of start to narrow focus, this is a great time to bring in some more immediate context. So for a persuasive paper, this might be presenting the different sides of the argument. So what I have here in my example is opinion 1 is you eliminate conflict by having uniforms. Opinion 2 is that you eliminate individuality, creativity, and student identity with school uniforms. So this narrow the focus part is a really great time to kind of present the different opinions that exist so that you can kind of get to your next step, which is right here in red. That's where the specific argument happens, where we make our individual argument about the school uniform. So in this case, school uniforms should not be required in public schools. So this is kind of just to illustrate how we started very broad up here with conformity, narrowed it a little bit to talk about uniforms and introduced to those two different opinions on it, and then led to here where we stated a thesis statement that can that addresses our writing task. So that's kind of the general format we want to use. But when we get to that thesis part and writing a thesis statement, there are kind of three things you want to make sure. That it's defensible, meaning that it is an argument and it has your opinion. That it's on task, meaning that it fits the assignment, it fits the writing prompt you've been given. And 3, that it's specific. So to dig into that a little bit more, for a persuasive thesis statement, a good format is to use they say and I say. They say means what would the opposition say, followed by the I say, which is my opinion as the writer and the argument that I'm going to make. So let's look at a few examples. The first one says, although there are both supporters and critics of caffeinated drinks, certain stakeholders must take actions to keep the public safe from the risks. So in this case, it presents what they say in terms of what opinions exist. That's where it talks about supporters and critics. But it ends with, I say, we must take action to keep public safe from the risks. Make sense? Let's look at the second example. By examining both the arguments of supporters and critics of caffeinated drinks, key scientific recommendations for businesses, communities, and families start to emerge. Again, I started with the they say, or the general opinion of supporters and critics, or even my opposition, and then I led into my argument, meaning that businesses, communities, and families need to start following recommendations from the science. So really making sure that we have our thesis. We're going to acknowledge what opposition might say. We're going to acknowledge that there are multiple opinions, but the second part of it, we want to make sure we say what I believe and what I say. So here's an example of a completed introduction. I've kind of color-coded it to fit our diagram on this page, right? So for that first part, that broader context, it says, walk down the hallway of any high school and you'll see a lot of the same jeans, the same backpacks, even the same haircut. High school creates an unparalleled pressure to conform, and it's on display every day across America. This is just my first part where I'm creating that broader context. So what I mean by a broader context is that I am creating that big idea of conformity. I'm creating a picture, or I'm drawing on an image that people have seen before, which in this case is a high school hallway, right? So then I'm going to move on to my narrow the focus. So for that part, it says, for some, this is to be celebrated. Some schools even require students to wear uniforms to avoid bullying and ridicule for those who cannot afford the latest fashion. Others would say this is a direct threat to individuality. So just like I said with our inverted method, I'm narrowing it down to our topic, which is about uniforms, right? But first, I'm going to present one opinion, which means that school uniforms should be in place. And then I'm going to present the other argument that they shouldn't, to kind of build a little bit of context around the subject and, like I said, narrow the focus to our topic of school uniforms. Then I have my thesis statement. So this is where I have my they say and my I say. While some might see school uniforms as a way to level the playing field, the worst thing a school can do is limit individuality. Therefore, school uniforms should not be required in public schools. This part right here, these last few lines, starting with the worst thing a school can do, that is where I'm stating my opinion that school uniforms should not be required. But before that, where it says, while some might see school uniforms as a way to level the playing field, that's where I've acknowledged what someone who disagrees with me might say. So again, to kind of recap what we have that broader context up here in blue. We narrowed it down to our topic and presented the two viewpoints. And then we came down here with our they say, I say thesis statement.